Good evening and welcome to Open Your Mind Radio. You have myself, Alan James.
And you have myself, Stephen George. A very good evening.
Good evening. It's Sunday the 13th of April 2014 and we'll have a great show tonight. We have our special guest on, Mark Passio, and we're going to be talking about natural law and laws and fluid belief systems and loads of things like that. All interesting stuff. But before we do that, let's find out what the communication channels are.
Yeah, Mary, can you tell people how they can communicate with us this evening?
The communication channels are email info@oymireland.com, by phone 046 927 1212, and you can also contact us direct through the OYM chat room.
Thanks, Mary. 046 927 1212 if you want to call us during the show. If you want to call in from outside the Republic of Ireland, it's going to be 00353 469 271212. We're also going to be monitoring the chat rooms this evening. That'll be the OYM chat room, oymradio.com. Over to the left-hand side, click here for the live chat, and you are in. You're in the hot room. We're also going to be monitoring the chat on the People's Internet Radio as well. So I'm going to say hi to everybody that's in both of those chat rooms. Alan.
Cheers, Steve. Okay, before we bring Mark on, Mark is going to be on in a few minutes now, but just a few things as usual that we're going to go through. Yesterday we had the United We Strike Radio Marathon, and it was very informative, great information. All the podcasts are up there. If you go to United We Strike Radio, unitedwestrike.com website, all the podcasts are there. We had some great guests on, and I'm going to be talking about one of the guests shortly in a few minutes. But if you need to go over, head over to that website. That's where all the details are. As I say, we had great guests. I will touch base on one of the guests in a few minutes, but Steve has something to say first.
Yes, I do. I always have something to say. April the 15th, as we mentioned, Alan mentioned, I think he mentioned last week and the week before, April the 15th, I believe that is Tuesday. There's going to be the first of a blood red moon. I believe it's going to be a first of 4. Is that correct? That's right. Yes, because you did mention that yesterday.
4 moons, two this year and 2 next year.
Yeah, so it's going to be the first of the blood red moon. So if you hear anything strange, seemingly, from what Alan was telling me, some kind of strange things happen around the time of the blood red moon. And he also said something yesterday, which I didn't know, but you said, and I'm quoting you now, that these blood red moons, they fall on, was it Jewish holidays?
Jewish holidays, yeah.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you notice something strange on the 15th, do let us know. We always like to hear some, stories or news and reviews of what you think.
My mother-in-law is coming to visit on Tuesday. That's pretty bad, isn't it?
I'm sorry to hear that.
Okay. That's
your
one
mother-in-law
thing.
is lovely, don't be saying
that's one thing that's happening, of course, yes. Hi, Mum. Right, okay. Now, do you want to tell us about the Bundy Ranch?
Oh, yes, I want to tell you about the Bundy Ranch, and it's nothing to do with Al Bundy. I don't know how many people remember Al Bundy.
Don't know.
No, okay.
I'm not.
Yeah, okay.
You're younger than me.
Yeah, not by that much. Al Bundy, like he was played by I can't remember the chap's name, but he was gonna the theme song "Love and Marriage." I believe it was Frank Sinatra. Love and Marriage. No. Okay. Wow. Did you have a TV in the 80s at all?
I did actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Just didn't watch that one.
You didn't have a license. Right. Anyway, in an epic standoff that InfoWars reporter David Knight, no connection to Michael Knight, as a Knight Rider, described as being like something out of a cowboy movie. Supporters of the Nevada cattle rancher Cliven Bundy advanced on a position held by BLM agents. I'm not sure what the BLM stands for.
The LM is for land management.
The BLM, bloody land management agents. Despite threats that they will be shot at, eventually forcing the BLM feds to release 100 of the cattle that had been stolen from the Bundy as part of a land grab dispute that threatened to escalate into a Waco-style confrontation. Now, I don't know too much about exactly what's going on because I'm concentrating more on what's happening in our own country. However, I did see the video that David Knight done. He has video up there on YouTube. I think you can also get it from Infowars.com. It's probably going to be number 1 on their page. But there was the handful of the agents, and they were threatening to shoot people. But the people, the regular people, the cowboy, I'm going to call them the cowboys because they were on horses and they were wearing cowboy hats. They all stuck together. They stood their ground. Again, as I say, I'm not 100% sure exactly the ins and outs and the details of the whole thing, but it seems that they were able to have somewhere in the region of 30,000 people just regular people who actually showed up to support Mr. Bundy. And eventually, I think I seen a gate, there was a lock on a gate, it was cut open, and the people, 30,000 people, they moved forward. And as much as the agents had threatened to shoot them, the agents backed down, and they moved backwards. So I mean, it was a kind of a fist in the air, yay for the common man. But
I think the 30,000. I actually heard it was about 1,500 to 2,000, but there was more people coming.
I heard 30.
Yeah,
I seen a picture and they said 30.
Okay, well,
so my 30 beats your 1,500.
Okay, well that's good. Well, the good news is that feds backed down, and Mr. Bundy could let the cattle go on the actual land. And it was all kind of, it's a padded envelope time. That's what it was, really. And the senator and the son was involved with some Chinese corporate company wanting to get the land because it was quite lucrative, that land. This is the information that we received. So, fair play to everybody who stood up for the people and stood up for themselves against the system. And thank God nobody got hurt and nobody got killed. That's a good thing. But how's your week anyway, Steve?
My week's been fine. As I say, I've been concentrating on kind of watching what's been happening in the Emerald Isle. And there's a lot happening. Again, it's probably the same as last week. There's a lot of stuff going on, and again, it's the common man standing up for his rights, which we're going to be talking about shortly with Mark Passio. But it's the common man and his I've had enough. I've just had enough, and the government and kind of the last straw scenario. And people are they're standing up, that they're not kind of cowering down anymore. And it kind of looks like that, people often talk about the fighting Irish. And for a long time we've been saying, where's the fighting Irish gone? They've disappeared. There are no fighting Irish. But, thanks to fluoride, we reckon people were dumbed down. And they have been for a long time, but people are starting to stand up. And I think it was yesterday, an estate agent in Maynooth, County Kildare, I actually live there, so I actually know the estate. I'm familiar with the estate agents, but there are a group going around. The name escapes me at the moment, as per usual. And whenever it's probably the anti-eviction task force. Whenever there's evictions going on, they're there and they're supporting the people who are being evicted. But they've gone around to Allsop auctioneers, and they've gotten Allsop auctioneers to agree not to sell people's houses or put them on the market, people's houses, if there's a dispute going on with banks or lending institutions. So that was good. But Coonan auctioneers in Maynooth, County Kildare, they actually had a property on their books. Now this property was a couple of acres, and it was in dispute. There was a young couple living on the land. As I say, it is in dispute, but yet Coonan auctioneers had it up for sale. So the lads went in, and they were there, I think, about 2 hours in total. But they eventually got to speak with people. The Gardaí were there, and they commented that the Gardaí were very professional in their manner and their approach. They were just there as peacekeepers. There was no pushing or shoving or messing going on. They eventually got Coonan auctioneers to sign an agreement to say that they, along with Allsop auctioneers, would not go ahead and put any properties on their books if there was a negotiation in progress, say, with a bank or a lending institution. So that was good. That was another strike for the common man. And I don't know if you heard this one, Alan, but Jan van der Ven, that will be the leader, well, I call him the leader, of Direct Democracy Ireland, that's DDI. He was actually interviewed on Mainstream.
Wow. And
I actually listened to the interview. It's about 4 minutes long. You can look it up on the net there. He was on C, as in Charlie, C103 in Cork, and he was on for about 4.5 minutes, I believe. And the lady who was interviewing him, it was definitely, you can tell the difference between say the likes of that interview and an RTE interview, because as you know, in RTE they're out to get you from the get go. The minute the interview starts, they're out to get you.
Yeah.
At any, they don't care. They're out for blood. But this woman on C103 down in Cork, she listened to what Jan had to say. He talked about direct democracy twice. And eventually she interrupted him, and I said, here we go. Here's the RTE, the tactics where she's going to interrupt them. But what she actually said was, I couldn't believe it. I was stuck to my chair. It's a good job I wasn't standing. I would have fell. She said, now you've mentioned direct democracy a couple of times. Can you explain to the people what it is?
Wow. Fantastic.
And he explained exactly what it is. He said it was in your first constitution here in Ireland. There's a room in the Mansion House, he said, where you can go in. You can actually see a copy of this document, to show that it was in your first constitution. She then let him have a say, and by the end of it, she said, hang on, so let me get this straight. You're talking about recall and we can get whatever it was, signatures, and we can call a referendum. Do you mean then, because what you said about direct democracy, when the bank bailout was signed on that evening, 2:00 in the morning, whatever, if we had had direct democracy then, she said, do you mean to say that would have had to go to the people first? And he said yes. And she said, well, I think it would have been a different outcome. So yeah, Jan van de Van, I love the man. He's the man, and he's on Cork, C103 in Cork. Again, look up the DDI website. I've seen it there earlier. The link to the podcast is on the DDI website, and I'm sure it'll be on Cork 103 as well. And there's my week. That's it, in a nutshell. How's your week?
Van the man, brilliant.
Van is the man.
We'll have to get him on the show, I think.
Yes, we will.
Right, very quickly, just as I say, we had United We Strike Marathon yesterday, and we came across another medical doctor. I'm beginning to think OYM is going to have to be the doctor's channel, because we have so many doctors coming on OYM these days, which is great that we have doctors who will speak up and talk about things. And this doctor, Dr. Rima, she was brilliant, very open-minded to what's going on. And not only that, but she has a website selling products that are hemp-based products. And you can buy the hemp oil. What Ricky Simpson, produces, that oil? You can buy this oil off the site. Now, I did ask her, will she ship to Ireland? And she said yes. Now, I don't know whether that's a generalisation, as in, oh yeah, we ship to Ireland. She didn't say, but we can't ship X, Y, and Z, because I know there's some countries she can't ship to, and there's certain things she can't ship. But we are going to get Dr. Rima. I did speak to her, and I said, we'd love to have you on the show. She said she'd love to come on. So we're going to get Dr. Rima on the show, and she can tell us all about what's going on, the bigger picture, health, and give us her website, tell us what products that she can ship over. And basically, the shop is full of products, loads of products, even down to cooking oils, organic coconut oils, has everything on it, okay? Now, some of them are not cheap, surprise, surprise, and some of them are cheap. So, it's something that you're going to sort out yourself and work out your own finances. But it's definitely going to be something of interest. But we'll get Dr. Rima on first, and then we'll get all the details off her. We'll organise a time and put it in the schedule and take it from there. I've also have another Dr. Dean Lloyd and Anne Rosen. We're going to arrange for them to come on the show as well. And we're going to be talking about hemp and all that kind of stuff, and all doctor issues and certain things like that. So, great guest to have on from the United We Strike Marathon. So, things can only get better. That's what I'll say.
There's a song about that, isn't there?
There's a song about that. Yeah. And talking about getting better and then learning more and educating the mind. We're going to bring our guest in now. We got notified by one of our listeners, came up in Donegal regarding Mark, and we checked out a few videos on YouTube with Mark in them. And Mark has a very similar system to our fluid belief system. For regular listeners, you probably hear us talking about our fluid belief system, which has taken a few years for us to kind of work out the psychology and the way human beings think, human behaviour and everything else. And we call it the fluid belief system. But Mark has a different name for it, but very similar to what we were talking about. So, we said to Mark, we look forward to the interview, and we're going to be talking, as I say, all things natural law as well. So without further ado, we're going to bring Mark in. Good evening, Mark. How are you doing?
Gentlemen, I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for inviting me onto your show today. Great to be here.
You're so welcome, Mark.
No problem. Thanks a lot for coming on, Mark. I've been, as I say, myself and Steve have been looking forward to this, because we can really get into the nuts and bolts of a fluid belief system and natural law and our rights and everything else. But before we go there, for people who don't know who you are, can you give us a bit of a background of your education and what you've been doing?
Sure. I'm an independent researcher, a public speaker, and a freedom activist, and a radio talk show host from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, here on the East Coast of the United States. And I've been involved in all things esoteric and occulted for the better part of 2 decades of my life. I would say going on 2 decades now. And in my youth, I got involved in on the dark path, the left-hand path, you would say. I went into dark occultism as a result of rejecting former religious indoctrination that I was brought into in my family and my early years of my life. And upon rejecting that as not the truth and as being part of another control system, I still lack the framework of knowledge to really explain how religion was a control system, and it turned into a lot of anger, and I wanted to seek out the exact antithesis of that, and I found it in the form of Satanism. And I got involved in some satanic organizations here on the East Coast of the United States. I was eventually some of my work was recognized by the high priest of the Church of Satan, Anton Lavey, who was the high priest of that organization in the early years of its formulation. And he has since passed. He passed in the late 1990s. But I started getting involved in Satanism as a priest within the organization called the Church of Satan. And as my involvement grew in it, I started to become aware that it wasn't just an isolated group of individuals working with hidden knowledge to advance themselves as far as individual power goes. They were working together in a very tight-knit way, and it comprised an eclectic variety of people from every walk of life and every single social institution on the face of the earth, from banking to politics to law to military to education, law enforcement, entertainment, medicine, you name it. And they weren't working separately. They were working together toward a common goal, which was to increase their own collective power at the expense of everybody else's freedom. They literally wanted to become the gods on this planet and have everybody else be their slaves. That was really their ultimate goal. And they were, the level I was involved in was very, very low level. It was what I would call neophyte level or absolute introductory initiate. I jokingly call it the Girl Scout level of the satanic hierarchy, because where it goes from there is much darker, much more psychopathic as you get up into the think tank organizations, as you get up into organizations directly connected with political agendas and eugenics, etc. So when I became involved, when I became aware that I had become involved at a very low level with an organized syndicate that was really looking to enslave the people of the world permanently, my conscience wouldn't allow me to continue with that work because I still had a conscience, somewhat. It may have been pretty buried at that point in my life, but it was still there. And when I backed out and made a lot of these people aware that I did not want to be involved or go any further, people always ask, well, wasn't there a whole lot of backlash? Didn't they want to try to keep you in their fold and silence you? And the answer is absolutely not even close. Nothing of the kind occurred. It was you don't want to help us, boy? Well, then there's the door. And don't let it hit you in the rear end on the way out. And you think we need you, and it was go and try to tell the world, how the world is really controlled. Good luck. You'll be banging your head against the wall for the rest of your natural life, because people are so dumbed down. People are so mind controlled. They're so brainwashed. And we control everything that they get to see and hear. So, good luck reaching that. They call people the dead. That's their name for the general asleep masses. The dead, they call them. Their rationale for that is they don't exercise their consciousness at all, the aspects of their consciousness, their thoughts, because they have no knowledge, about how things really work. They don't know themselves. They don't know the laws of nature, and they don't care. They're apathetic, so they don't have their emotions working properly. They don't really care about what's going on. And then they're lazy and cowardly. They don't really act to change things, and they don't have a lot of willpower to do that. So if all of those aspects of consciousness are missing, the person is essentially completely unconscious permanently, and that's the definition of death. And so they consider all the evil stuff that they do or that they influence in the world as that they're doing this to the dead, people who aren't really truly alive, and that's how they, excuse themselves. That's how they give themselves absolution and their own, forgiveness for all of the evils that they conduct in the world, because they look at it as, we're not really doing this to live individuals. These people are already dead. You know?
Okay,
and,
just on that, no, because, and that's their excuse, because they see it that if you're too stupid to realize what's going on, well, then you're dead.
Mm-hmm. Essentially, that's how they think about people. It's a very warped ideology. I can't really make the claim that they're wrong about the majority of people's consciousness, unfortunately. I mean, I'd like to say it isn't that way. It certainly is that way. But I tend to take a different approach. I tend to take the approach that, well, if their consciousness is low, maybe it's the responsibility of the people who do have a higher level of consciousness to morally uplift those people through knowledge. That's what the great work really is. And that's what I've been really trying to convey to people who are aware of what's going on in the world, that with the other people that are, quote, asleep and don't understand what's going on, it is our responsibility to morally educate those people. It is our responsibility to make them see the truth by continuously speaking it nonstop, constantly. And this is a work that most people are loath to do. When you say that to people, they hate that is the work that really we need to do. They want to shirk that personal responsibility. And I am here to tell people that is absolutely our personal responsibility. That's what the nature of spiritual awareness and work is in the modern day here on Earth. To actually uplift the consciousness of our fellow human beings by the power of our voice, by speaking the truth to them continuously, no matter who it makes uncomfortable and no matter how much we think that that's a burden to us. The problem is so few people are doing that work that the world is still remaining asleep.
Yeah, I totally agree. Myself and Steve feel that we have a moral conscience, and that moral conscience is what drives us into doing what we're doing. The radio show being one, and other things that we get involved in outside the show. And although people will turn around and go, well, don't you think people, you shouldn't really be preaching, etc., etc. But my argument is, and this is probably where we're going to get into the psychology of how the mind works. And I've mentioned this on the show time and time again, is that if somebody, for me, people have either an opinion or they're opinionated. Now, if they have an opinion, then to me, they're open-minded to take on my opinion, what might be. We can swap opinions and swap ideas, and they're open to it. But somebody who's opinionated will just give you their opinion, and that's the way it is, and you have to accept what they say, right?
Right.
Now, the other thing, and I've said before on the show, is that from a psychological point of view, and this is not, it's not subjective, it's objective, this is studied science, is when, people fundamentally see not knowing something as a weakness. So what people do who lack confidence in their intellect, they won't say, I don't know. They'll say, oh, that's a load of crap or whatever. Okay?
Right.
So somebody who is confident with their intellect won't mind showing a weakness. And what they do is they say, I don't really know much about that, so I can't really comment. That shows that they have confidence in their own intellect. They're able to show a weakness. So, but the people who turn around and go, if you say, well, do you think there's a handful of men in the world, controlling the world and manipulating the people? And they go, oh, it's a load of crap. I normally say, well, is that your opinion or is that your research? Because if it's your opinion, I don't really want it. But if you've researched it, then show me.
Yeah, and even more so, there's another area that you can go into that is direct first-hand experience. Many people lack that perspective, so, I don't think that they could be faulted for not having that. That's what showed it to me directly without even having to go through book knowledge to acquire that understanding. I was with these people doing this, they were eugenicists, they were controllers, they were people who were already in the positions of power and influence in modern institutions. Seeing that mindset of control, of desiring more and more centralized control from a first-hand perspective of actually being involved with them, that will get rid of opinion and belief real quick and make it knowledge in the blink of an eye, which is essentially what happened with me. But to go back to this idea of, opinion and belief, when people are working from a framework of just opinion and belief and not looking at things as existing independently and objectively from their perceptions and making it their goal to align their perceptions to what actually is, this idea of opinion could, start to morph into the idea of solipsism, that, it's just all opinion and it's just all perception and nothing else exists and there is no such thing as truth and it's all belief and one person's belief is just as valid as another person's belief. And this is really a dangerous ideological territory that a lot of people get trapped in, because if we want to consider ourselves the arbiters of truth, then we're really going against nature itself, because there is such a thing as truth that exists independently from us. And the problem is so many people with rigid opinionated belief systems turn that into total dogma, and anything that conflicts with that existing belief system is immediately rejected. It is said that the hallmark of true intelligence is being able to hold an idea within your mind without at first immediately accepting it wholeheartedly or rejecting it out of hand.
See, this is why I love this man. You've just quoted Aristotle, which is the mark of an educated mind is to entertain a thought without accepting it.
There it is. That philosophy is what we need to really allow to drive us as human beings and go where the truth leads, and whatever former opinion / belief system / dogmatic approach that we had taken previously needs to be shed if we come into new contact with new information that proves that reality works otherwise. Now, this, it should also be clarified, there are certain things that are true and are existing and can be known. And once they are understood of how they work, then it is all we can do is align our perceptions to that objective reality and then align our behavior to that objective reality. And that is, this is all about the knowing of the difference of what is and cannot be changed versus knowing what is simply a condition that currently exists that can be changed by an act of will. That's where real wisdom comes in, is understanding what is there objectively and independently from us, that all we can do is align our senses to it and understand it. And nothing we do is going to change that. It is what is. It is truth. So, that's my demystified definition for truth. It's just simply that which is, because it's that which is in effect, that's that which has occurred, that which has taken place in the past and is happening in the present moment. And people have these overly mystified and complicated definitions of what truth is, when in fact we really need to just simplify it and have a very basic working definition that truth is just that which is in the universe. And all we can do with truth is align our perceptions to it and go wherever it leads, so to speak. Instead of trying to say, we're the arbiters of truth, and based on our level of comfort, we get to make up what truth is, and we decide what happened or didn't happen, or what is or what is not. That's where human ego comes into the picture in a big way. A lot of people are in that mindset of trying to play arbiter of truth and determine what is and what is not for themselves, not to look at it independently from themselves and just say, whatever the universe is telling me actually is here, I need to align my perceptions to that and accept it. No, they want to say, because I'm uncomfortable with the possibility of that being the case, that being the way that it really is, I'm going to say, oh, it isn't that way. And it magically becomes so just because I'm not comfortable with dealing with the reality that's right before my eyes. This is the condition that I call the arbiter of truth complex or syndrome. And it's really the state of cognitive dissonance psychologically, if you break it down.
That's exactly that's what I was going to say. I was going to come in there, which is one of Steve's famous 2 words that he likes using, cognitive dissonance. I mean, we can make the assumption People want the truth. But a lot of people, because of apathy, and I always talk about, in this world you have givers and takers, and the difference is energy. Now, human beings, we take the least path of resistance. That's the way we are programmed. We will take the least path of resistance. But givers don't mind using more energy. Takers use as little energy as they possibly can. So we can't make the assumption that people will always want to go after the truth, because
that's right.
they've been so conditioned since birth, by our parents, by our family, by our friends, by everybody. So when you keep hearing the same lie over and over again, it's then classed as the truth. And then because it's reinforced through the media and everything else, when you go to somebody, and this is what me and Steve talk about, when we say they're told that 2 and 2 is 5 all their life, and when I come along and Steve comes along and go, by the way, 2 and 2 is 4, they look at us as if we have 2 heads.
You got it. And see, you've made some phenomenal points right in there, in that you used the word, that's their condition. That's how they've been conditioned. See, so many people are under the completely false assumption and the belief system that people not wanting the truth is human nature. And that's not the case. This is not our nature. You said it. You used the term. It's how they've been programmed.
Yeah.
See, this is a very big part of understanding the human condition right now, and understanding the difference between the human condition and human nature. And people have completely erroneous views of what human nature is all about. Often they'll come down on one of two imbalanced and completely radical sides of what human nature is. Some people think it's unquestioningly good, of a divine or angelic quality. Probably less people think that way. And then there's other people who think human nature is inherently flawed, fundamentally flawed, or even demonic and, somehow tainted. And both of these are very imbalanced worldviews that lead to people really accepting things that are completely untrue, and then they're aligning their behavior with those deceptions and creating chaos as a result. We have to understand human nature as simply being something that is programmable through information. That's what the nature of the human being is. They function like a computer. And notice I said like a computer, not as a computer. We're not actual computers. The functions of the human being and the consciousness of the human being function similar to a computer. Okay, so human nature isn't inherently good nor evil. What we really need to understand is the operating conditions, okay, in which the human being exists.
Yeah.
Okay, that create the current human condition. Yeah. And that's because human beings are programmable. So at the first few years of a person's life, the format of that, quote, computer operating system's being laid down. That's the conditions and the information a child is taking in during their formative years. That's why they call it formative years. And if then after those formative years we're being exposed to a bad operating system called human culture that is infested with absolutely wrong and dogmatic belief systems, and then we're getting bad programming, we're getting bad software programs which are erroneous and dogmatic belief systems that are passed down to us by people who have come before us. Well, what do you expect the output of that system to be? Do you expect it to be orderly? Do you expect it to be something that really makes sense of the world? No, the output through behavior, which is what the output of the human being is, onto the screen that we call life, in this computer analogy, is also going to be chaotic and distorted, and it's going to create nothing but chaotic conditions in our lives. And that's what we have to understand. If quality information goes into a human being, quality output through behavior is going to come out of a human being.
Yeah.
If garbage information goes into a human being, garbage output through behavior is going to come out of the human being.
I think we're going down the road of nature versus nurture. And,
That's right.
like, we're not born with phobias. Phobias are learned.
Correct.
And this is the thing, and as you say, we are programmed, and any person, like if you go to a hypnotherapist and if you have a phobia, they will say that's a learned response. You've learned, that phobia is something that you've learned, and what they will do is they will deprogram you,
right.
from that learned response. So, and this is an argument that we can actually do a test on air now at the moment. For all our listeners, I'm going to do a bit of a psychological test. as we're going down this road, we're going to do the nature versus nurture. And, you know, one of the things they say is that when we go, now I don't want anybody to fold their arms just yet. Don't fold your arms. But what we want you to do is, before you fold your arms, I want you to think about, do you put your left over right or put your right over left when you fold your arms? Don't fold your arms. Think about it first. Left over right or right over left. And then when you decide whether it's left or right over left, then do it. Okay? Then fold your arms and then unfold your arms and then do it the other way. Okay?
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
There's something wrong with you.
No, I'm serious. This is a bit of a psychological test, because if you fold your arms the other way, it just doesn't feel right. It's uncomfortable.
Right.
Right? So there's an argument that goes on in science, and as we talked about, nature versus nurture. Now, Steve's folding his arms here. Now do it the other way.
Yeah.
Do it the other way.
I can't. Hang on wait a minute. Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, isn't that weird? It's uncomfortable, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's strange.
Yeah.
Wow.
So in science.
So what does that mean?
In psychology, well, you know, is that a learned behavior, or is that something that was natural? That's that you're born generic, that you automatically fold your arms like that, or was that something that you learned and you just followed that up?
I'd say in the womb, that's probably the way I was.
Yeah.
Even in the womb, I was stubborn. Going,
okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so that's kind of.
I don't know. So is that learned or?
Well, no, I don't know. I think it'd be more natural.
So you're getting us to do some homework or do something, and you're not going to give us the answer.
No, I think that would be more natural than learned.
I have a right to shoot you. I'm going to exercise that right now.
Yeah, I think that would be more natural.
I tend to think that goes along with your natural handed dominance. Like, I'm left-handed, so when I did the experiment, I folded left over right, and when I fold right over left, it feels very unnatural to me. So I would say that's directly associated, obviously, with the dominance of whether you're left-handed or right-handed.
Yeah.
Well, hang on. So what way do you do it?
Right, I do right over left.
And I do right over left. Well, Mark says he's left-handed and he does it left over right. But you're left-handed as well.
I'm left-handed.
So you're not really left-handed.
Well, I am left-handed.
No, you're not.
Which goes back to the question: is that a learned behavior?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So there you go.
Interesting.
Well, there you go. That was just an impromptu thing, by the way. There's no sheets here with analysis of exactly what happens. I just thought I'd throw that in there. But exactly what we're talking about the learned behavior and people being programmed, and and the trouble is, when you go and try and this cognitive dissonance that people suffer from, and you try and talk to these people to wake them up, which is what we all try and do, to say, look, what's going on, and you back it up with science, they still turn around and go, look, I'm not bothered, I'm just not interested, I'm too busy,
right.
blah, blah, blah.
It's a level of discomfort, just like folding their arm the wrong way, because you're asking them to unlearn something and do something a different way, or see something from a different perspective. And they're ingrained in a program or a patterning of comfort in their current ignorance, and they think that that's somehow blissful. And, the old adage, ignorance is bliss, nothing could be farther from the truth. Ignorance is death and destruction. Ignorance is chaos. When we ignore what is, expect resistance from the universe, and that's what we have to understand about how natural law really works. If we continue to ignore truth, we're going to go further and further into bondage and enslavement.
Yeah, definitely. And we need to, well, again, even, as I say, even presenting people with the information and, the research to back it up, sometimes you're banging your head off a brick wall with it. But one of the things that we do want to talk about, and I think it's important that we need to get into it and start talking about it, and we mentioned it just before the show, is the people don't, in school, in the education system, we are not taught our rights. We're not told what our rights are. And there's no, as I said to you before the show, I would love to see a book in the bookshop saying, as a human being, these are your rights. So people say you have the right to this and you have the right to that, but there's no kind of definitive list to say what your rights are. So I'm a bit kind of confused to a certain extent, because I know what certain rights are, but I'm sure there's a hell of a lot more. So how do we go about learning what our rights are?
Well, what we really need to do is understand natural law. That's what you're essentially saying is that you wish that, we were taught natural law when we were young. And there's a reason we're not taught natural law. Natural law, I call it the most occulted information on the face of the earth. Now, when people hear the word occult, they have a connotative meaning usually in their mind, and they flinch from hearing that word because they've been programmed and conditioned to believe that the word occult means something other than it really does. The word occult, O-C-C-U-L-T, in English, is derived from the Latin adjective occultus, O-C-C-U-L-T-U-S in Latin. Occultus in Latin means hidden. Now, that word, that adjective in Latin, is in turn derived from the Latin verb occultare, O-C-C-U-L-T-A-R-E, occultare. Occultare means to hide, to conceal, or to keep secret, to veil from sight. Okay? So all the word occult has ever meant, means now, and ever will mean is hidden from sight, difficult to see with the eye. The root word, the ultimate root word that those words come from is oculus. Oculus, O-C-C-U-L-U-S in Latin, which means eye. This is all related to vision, related to what we can see and what we cannot see, or what we have a difficult time seeing. The occult is knowledge that is difficult to see in plain sight. It requires deeper introspection. It requires deeper digging to unveil it, to uncover it, to discover it, because it is veiled from sight by its nature. The occult is hidden from people for a reason. People will ask then, well, why is it occulted? It is occulted for a deliberate reason. Knowledge applied in the world is power. Okay? Not just knowledge by itself, but knowledge applied is power. Okay?
Yeah.
So if you hoard knowledge and you keep it away from other people, you are creating and maintaining a power differential.
Yeah.
Because you're taking the potential power that can be applied in the form of knowledge and you're holding it back from other people. And the people at the top of the pyramid structure that rules the earth, okay, at the top of the control system, they have a whole lot of knowledge, not only about how the world works, not only about how the laws of nature work, but they have knowledge about, most of all, how the human psyche operates. And this is what we have to understand the occult as. The occult is ancient knowledge of psychology. How the human being ticks, how we work, how we operate, our motivations, our desires, our ways of thinking, okay? How you can manipulate those ways of thinking, how you can influence somebody's thinking. That's what the occult is. And then the second body of knowledge that the occult, or the hidden knowledge, comprises is the laws of nature, the scientific laws, okay, the physical laws. You know, the laws that govern all the bodies of the heavens, the laws that govern all the interactions on the earth and in microscopic particles and subatomic particles. But then there's another body of knowledge that is incorporated in that, those larger laws, that is the knowledge of natural law, which I call the most occulted information on the earth. It is the most hidden because it is the most transformational, empowering knowledge that someone can ever take into themselves and understand. And that's why the controllers of the world don't want anybody understanding natural law. And this has been called many different things throughout the ages. Okay? It's been called moral law. It has been called God's law. It has been called the laws of consequence. It has been called karmic law. Okay, it has been referred to as, the laws of attraction. There's so many different names for it. It doesn't make a difference what you call it. A name is just a label. What natural law is, okay, now let's break it down and give the basic definition. And let's break down each word. The word natural, it comes from the Egyptian word neter. N-E-T-E-R is how we would transliterate the word neter in English. Neter in Egyptian means God or spirit. So when we put it together with the suffix al, al is an ancient root that means related to or having to do with, dealing with, or connected with. And therefore we put that together. The word natural actually means having to do with spirit, having to do with the spiritual essence of everything. That's what the word natural actually means. Very, very opposed to what many people believe the word natural means, because when they hear the word natural in the modern day, this word has been hijacked and it's been obfuscated. The real definition of it has been obfuscated. And people think that it is related to Darwinism. You hear the word natural and immediately people's minds go to the scientism dogma of Darwinian macrobiological evolutionary theory, okay, which has to do with this concept of the natural order, quote unquote, being the survival of the most ruthless of the species. And this absolutely has nothing to do with nature, and it has nothing to do with order, okay? That idea, that ideology in the mind, which is really social Darwinism, which is how the social engineers of our world exploited the flawed theory of macrobiological Darwinian theory. This ideology and worldview has absolutely nothing to do with anything that is actually natural or orderly. I call this worldview the artificially imposed system of chaos that currently controls the human condition. It has nothing to do with the natural order. The natural order is natural law, okay? The natural order is the conditions which ultimately govern, the boundary conditions which govern the universe. And it has nothing to do with this Darwinian theory.
Okay.
Let me make it clear that natural law has nothing to do with what people traditionally consider the quote-unquote natural order. So then what is natural law? Right. Well, if we break down I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to throw in there, because there's so many things you're talking about. I want to kind of jump in and just kind of pick out the things one by one. But Darwin's theory of evolution, well, you know, it's called a theory for a reason, because I don't think it's been proven. Number one. Number two. Not. No, exactly, yeah. I mean, if you look at Darwin's theory of evolution and you look at what the Bible says, well, then they contradict each other anyway. And then the other thing is that, where does the law of the jungle come into this, into natural law?
Natural law has nothing to do with the quote law of the jungle as people commonly understand that term, because they consider that how animals live. Okay? Natural law does not apply to the animal kingdom, in the sense that human beings are actually not just another animal. Okay? So if you think human beings are just another animal, that's actually a tenet of Satanism. Satanism teaches that.
Let me jump in there. But let's take it. There was a documentary done by the National Geographic, and it was a documentary about what happens if power went on the planet. There was an EMF or an EMP on the planet, and all the power went, and they showed the documentary of 10 days of what would happen when the power went and people couldn't get food and stuff like that. And the natural law of the jungle kicked in with human beings. It was
I would say that's not natural. That's not the natural law of human beings. That is the result. That's the programming that may occur. And again, that's just speculation in the documentary.
Yeah.
That's the programming that may kick in as a result of how we have been living. In other words, the condition that we have been living in. That doesn't mean that is our actual nature. That would still be a choice with how to behave in an instance like that, which we could take control of and govern for ourselves, and not behave that way if we are conscious enough and if we have evolved ourselves enough through taking our mind out of a condition of being like an animal. The problem is most people don't perform that work upon themselves. And their current condition, not their nature, is like just another animal.
Yes.
But that is not the human nature. The human nature is that we are capable of evolving much farther than any normal animal can evolve their consciousness. Certainly at this time period in history, we are capable of doing that with the level of information that exists here on the earth. The problem is people are loath to do that work upon themselves because of how much time, attention, and introspection that it takes to do that upon the human psyche. So again, this notion of that this is just how human beings are programmed to behave, it's just the human condition. That is capable of being changed. It is not something that is set in stone or that would have to happen that way. It is ultimately a free will choice. And that's what we have to understand when it comes to natural law. Natural law is a deterministic component of creation, and it operates and plays with and it dynamically interacts with the randomness component of creation, which is free will, that has been gifted to beings with a capacity for intelligence. And that is who natural law applies to. Again, natural law does not apply to the animal kingdom. And I'm saying that as being separate and distinct from the human kingdom. The order of beings that is capable of developing holistic intelligence. Okay? The animal kingdom does not have that capacity. They literally are running on a program, and that program is of a lesser evolutionary complexity and development than a more complex consciousness like a human being. They're not the same form of consciousness any more than or similar to how an animal is a much more complexified level of consciousness than the plant kingdom is. So we can't apply the same generalities or laws or rules that apply to the plant kingdom to the animal kingdom nor to the human kingdom. They are separate and distinct because they involve different complexities of consciousness. So natural law applies to beings, and I'll unpack this further when I get to the working definition of natural law, but natural law applies to human beings because we have the capacity for holistic intelligence, whereas it does not apply to the animal kingdom because they do not have those same capacities as the human being. So to go back to the definition, the word natural simply means having a basis in nature, having a basis in truth, and not made or caused by any three-dimensional being. Not made or caused by humankind, not made or caused by any other beings that exist in the universe. It is created by the universe itself. Now, let me be very specifically clear about that. The laws that we're talking about are laws that are created by the universe itself. Or if you want to call that force God, fine. I have no problem with that word. Some people may. I personally could care less who has a problem with that word. But you could call it the underlying force of intelligence inherent in creation, if you want to call it that. Okay? You could call it the unified field of consciousness, if you want to label it that. Again, it's just a name. It's just a label. The idea here is that natural law is not made by anything within creation. It is made by the force of creation itself, like gravity, like the laws that govern physical objects, like electromagnetism, like momentum, like inertia. These laws are already in place in nature, and nothing can take them out of place. There's nothing that anybody could do that could completely cancel the existence of the law of gravity in effect in nature. We could temporarily nullify it through a piece of technology, but that doesn't mean that law is still not actively being applied in that space.
It's just being manipulated,
temporarily as well.
Okay,
so
listen.
These laws exist independently of us, and they exist within creation, and they are binding and immutable. They have an effect whether we understand that they exist or not. They are they have an effect whether we understand them or not. It doesn't make a difference. Ignorance is no excuse when it comes to this form of law. Okay? It doesn't make a difference whether you don't understand the law of gravity. If a 2-year-old walks over a ledge because they didn't understand that they would fall, nature doesn't say, oh, well, we have to excuse their ignorance and they're going to levitate in midair because it would be a tragedy for this poor toddler to die. It doesn't make that exception.
It's funny.
The toddler falls and is injured or dies. That's what happens.
I normally use that analogy. It's just so uncanny we're on the same, hymn sheet, because I normally use that analogy with the law of gravity and say just because you don't believe it doesn't mean that if you go over a cliff that you're going to keep on walking and not fall. The same with kind of my approach to the law of karma. You know, for me, the law of karma is like an elastic band, and you can only pull it for so long before it's going to, you know,
that's right,
fly back
that's
and
exactly
hit you.
Right.
And even if people don't believe in the law of karma, it doesn't matter. It's still there because it's a universal law.
There it is. You just said it right there. It doesn't make a difference whether you believe in this or not. This goes back to when we were talking about belief versus truth. Belief, an opinion or a belief is just that. But something that exists objectively and independently in nature does not care whether you believe in it or not. You could not believe that hot electrical stove, and the iron that's glowing red because you turned on that electrical stovetop. You can believe all you want that you can keep your hand on there for an hour and there will be no consequences for doing so. Good luck with that behavior. Enjoy what you get on the other side, really.
Okay.
Because there are going to be consequences for that, and that's what we're talking about here when it comes to natural law. These are existing conditions in nature which are binding and immutable. And immutability means that it is impossible to change it by anything that a human being or any being is capable of doing in the universe. These laws cannot be taken out of effect. They are a product of the creation of the universe and can never be separated from the universe. That's what natural laws are. So now let's give a working definition, okay, so that people can understand what these laws do in our experience and how we are actually co-creating our reality, whether our behaviors are in harmony with these laws or in opposition to these laws. So what is the working definition for natural law, the term natural law? Natural law is the universal, non-man-made, binding, and immutable conditions that are in place in the universe that govern the consequences of the behavioral choices of beings that have the capacity for holistic intelligence and are capable of understanding those laws, have the capacity for the understanding of those laws. Now, that's a mouthful that I just said, so let me just repeat it one more time. The universal, meaning existing everywhere in creation, no matter where you go, they are inescapable. They are non-man-made. Okay? They exist inherently in nature and are not made by any beings within the universe. They are binding. Okay? So, to go back to non-man-made, that means they're not written by man. They can be written down, but it doesn't make a difference whether they're written or not. Okay? They are in existence. They're not man-made laws. Okay? They're binding. That means they have an effect whether you understand how they work or not, whether you want them to be true or not, okay? Whether you don't like how they function, it doesn't make a difference. Tough if you don't like how they function. They exist. If you don't like how gravity functions, tough. Good luck with, getting that not to exist anymore. All you can do is recognize it, understand how it works, and then align your behavior to it so you don't cause harm to yourself. That's the exact thing when it comes to natural law. That's all you can do. It's not up to you whether it exists or not. And they're immutable. We cannot change them. They exist, and all we can do is understand them and then align our behavior to them so that we prosper in their effect as opposed to create self-inflicted suffering by ignoring these laws. And they govern the consequences of the free will behavioral decisions, okay? The decisions that we make and then act in a certain way. Then we receive consequences for that behavior, and it is the behavior of beings that are gifted with the capacity for their understanding. Now notice I didn't say beings that already do understand them. It doesn't make a difference whether you currently understand them or not. These laws are still in effect. But they govern the behaviors of beings with the capacity to understand them. Therefore, beings that don't have the capacity to understand them, they do live by what we would refer to as the law of the jungle, or what I would just refer to as animalistic consciousness. Now, the question then becomes, would it be right or proper for a human being to just live their life according to animalistic consciousness? In other words, is a human being nothing than an animal in the field? And again, this is a satanic tenet. That's what Satanism teaches. Satanism teaches people human beings are no different than any animal living in the wild, and we should behave accordingly. We should live as take what we want, do as we please. There are no laws that govern our behavior, and we are going to become God here by basically living as a completely egoic, animalistic consciousness and doing whatever we want regardless of whose rights we trounce in the process, as long as we come out on top. That's Satanism. And I'm not asking anybody to believe that that's what Satanism is. I'm telling you directly that's what Satanism is, as a direct result of having been a priest within that organization for 10 years of my life. So you would think that like a Catholic priest might know a little bit about the Catholic religion. You would think that a Jewish rabbi might know a little bit about Judaism, or a Muslim imam might know a little bit about Islam. Okay? Well, a satanic priest might know a thing or two about the tenets of Satanism because he had been espousing them and practicing them for years of his life. Okay? So I'm not asking anybody to believe that that's a satanic ideology. I'm explaining to you that that's satanic ideology when you think that that's what the right way of existing in the world is. And this is social Darwinism. That's what social Darwinism is the belief that that's all a human being is. Okay? We are much infinitely more than that. Okay? We are being gifted with free will, gifted with the capacity for holistic intelligence, gifted with the all-empowering gift of choice about how we will or will not behave. And this is the dynamic of randomness and freedom that interplays, that interacts and dynamically exchanges energy with the deterministic component of creation known as natural law, which are the governing dynamics for consciousness. Consciousness is governed. You know, we think of things like, all the laws of nature apply to everything except human beings. This is how people think. Okay? That it governs the motions of the galaxies. It governs the motions of the nebulae. It governs the motions of stars. It governs the motions of planets. The interaction of subatomic particles. It governs all the energy systems on planets, weather systems, etc. Okay? It governs everything. Law governs everything in the universe except human behavior. That's exempt. That's not governed by nature. Nothing is in control of that. No, man gets to do whatever he wants unchallenged, unless some other man or group of men and women happen to actually take physical consequence, physical action against them to stop them, you know, or write down man's laws to try to govern their behavior. Yeah, there's, you know, it's the epitome of hubris to think everything in creation is governed except the choices of behavioral actions that man makes in his day-to-day life. That's not governed by anything. I mean, in other words, what I'm saying here is people who believe that, they have this illness that I call arbiter of truth syndrome. They have this idea that man is God. We get to make up what truth is. We're not actually looking at what's really there and adjusting our perceptions accordingly. We're making it all up as we go along and deciding what's right for us is right, what's wrong for us is wrong, and we don't have to actually observe that in nature to understand what a right is and a wrong is. We could just make up whatever we want, and there's no consequence for that. You know? Yeah. That's what people who are stuck in the satanic mindset actually believe.
Okay, so let's get into the whole rights issue, because I think this is important. Now, we have a whole load of questions as well. So I'll tell you what we do. We'll quick fire the questions over to you, and if you can kind of sum them up in a sentence or two, that'd be great. We'll quick fire the questions and we'll get into the rights issue, because I think that's something we need to delve into.
Absolutely.
Steve, over to you.
Okay, Mark. Yeah, great information. There's a lot of activity on the chat rooms there. That people are definitely getting a lot out of what you're saying.
Great.
A hell of a lot of questions coming in. I'm just going to start from the top and work my way down. First question in was from Toy, and Toy was wondering, do you believe in the real existence of Satan, and is it correct that he has 2 million soldiers?
not as a physical entity. It is a force in nature. I would consider the satanic force the force that is known in occult circles as the force of involution. There are two dynamic forces constantly interoperating in creation. One is the entropic force that breaks things down, that creates decay, that creates division, that creates opposition, that creates the resistance to flow in any given system. It creates chaos. It's the chaos-creating force, the force of entropy. That's what entropy is. In occult circles, they refer to this force as involution, the involutionary force. And what involution means is to roll inward or to tighten up, to curl up into a ball, to compress. It is the compressive force in nature. Okay? What this does is it shuts consciousness down. That's what the satanic force does. It kills consciousness. It creates unconsciousness. It creates stagnation. Okay? Stagnation to the evolutionary force. That's the second force in nature. Look, the word Satan is a Hebraic term. It comes from ancient Hebrew language, which simply means the opposer, the divider, the adversary, the one who tears down, the one who rips apart. That's really where that word comes from. That's all it means. Ha-shatan in Hebrew. It just means the adversary, the opposer, the one who divides. Okay? It is the divisive involutionary force. It is the entropic force, the force which holds consciousness back. You might even just simply describe it as the force of fear. Okay? The opposite to that, the force which unfurls, the force which expands consciousness, is the evolutionary force. Okay, this is the ordering principle, the principle of intelligence in nature, the principle of alignment with truth, the principle of true care, the principle of will, higher will, of alignment of consciousness to higher will. And that's what the higher will of creation is, to evolve, to learn, to grow, to expand, to unfold. That's what evolution means, to unfold, to unroll, to roll out, to expand and flower. So these are the two forces that, good occult schools of teaching teach people about their existence and how they are opposite forces. And we have to order our intelligence, okay? We have to use our intelligence to create order in alignment with the laws of nature, in alignment with natural law principles. When we do that, we are evolving. When we refuse to do that, we are stagnating, and entropy is ruling our lives. And we are coming into contact with that satanic energy, which holds us back from where we say we want to go. That's what I consider Satan as.
We will get to the solution-based system, or we'll talk about solutions more at the end of the show. But I know we have a host of questions there. So
we have a bucket load of questions.
We have a bucket load. So if we can do a quick shot answer on it, Mark. I know it's very hard. Very hard, but if you can do your best on it, because there's so much we have to cover.
I'll keep it brief so we can get to the difference between right and wrong.
That's great. Yeah.
Okay, Mark. Speaking of Satan and the involution, all that. Agent was wondering, why do some people love to glamorize Satan? By that, I'm guessing he means, I was going to ask a similar question. I was going to say about the likes of some of the rock stars, that they're out there and they're glamorizing that.
In the ideology of Satanism, the religion you might call it, they use the trapping of Satan to represent the force which is deliberately opposed to the creator of the universe. The force which is deliberately opposed to the laws of the Creator, that is deliberately opposed to the laws of morality and goodness. So they're using that biblical, symbolic representation as a trapping for saying, I'm going to stand against all those natural laws of creation. I'm going to do what I want, regardless of what is right, okay? Regardless of what how I am bound by law. I'm going to oppose the true natural order of natural law, and I'm going to try to create my artificial, chaotic order here on the earth with me propped up as a god. That's why they choose the symbol Satan, because that's the force that opposes the true creative force, the true underlying, orderly, intelligent principle that is inherent to creation, which you could call the Creator.
So they want to be gods. But I mean, we've heard before that people say that each one of us, we are all gods in our own right.
We are gods with a small g because we are co-creating the experience in harmony with the boundary conditions of the Creator known as natural law. Through our free will.
Yeah.
Both of those principles are in effect. See, this is the difference between two opposing worldviews. One person who has a worldview of randomness, that everything is just chaotic and there's no purpose for anything. It's a very big left-brain scientism, dogmatic-based worldview. Okay? They dismiss, true free will. And they also dismiss natural law. And then religion, dismisses free will. And they say God runs everything in creation. Hey, God's the ultimate control freak. He controls every single event in creation. There's not really any such thing as free will. This is a real right-brained, religiously imbalanced worldview. The truth is exactly in the middle. The truth is that there is a deterministic component of creation that is called natural law, that are the boundary conditions that the Creator of the universe put into effect to govern consciousness and behavior. And then there is randomness. There is the free will principle, that we are gifted with choice to whether to align our behavior to those boundary conditions and therefore not create self-inflicted suffering, or whether we are going to, through our behavior, oppose those natural laws of creation, and we're going to create tons of self-inflicted suffering for ourselves and chaos and slavery as a result.
Well, I think you have that, you get the Catholic kind of teachings of we're not worthy. And,
Sure.
And everybody wants to blame, well, not everybody, but some people don't want to take responsibility for themselves. And they keep blaming God. Oh, it's God's wish, and it's God's this, and it's God's that, which is complete mumbo-jumbo as far as I'm concerned.
That's right. God's will for us is our will for us, because the Creator gifted us with free will to choose between right and wrong.
Although that free will has been taken away from us, and is currently being taken away from us, because, we do have this perception of free will. And it's like, a sheep in a field. And as long as you can walk around the field, you have this perception of freedom. But it's when you get to the edge of the field with the bushes and you can't go any further. And we know psychologically that the powers to be have to give us this element of freedom. Because if they didn't, we'd suss it up straight away that we're in this kind of jail system.
Right.
But because we are allowed to walk around...
Consent.
Sorry?
Our consent is their energy. Yes.
Yeah. And so we have to be, and this is why, we have free will, but this is what they're trying to control. And they do it by using these spells, like spellings, and they use the paperwork. It's all consensual. And although, at the end of the day, even if you turn around and say, well, I'm not consenting today, you have the thugs who are, obviously used by the government to come and knock on your door or, take your car or whatever. Because they're not trained to understand that that everything's consensual.
Exactly. And that's why the understanding of language and the words we speak and the definitions of words are so totally important, because, oftentimes we're literally being put under a spell by the words people are using to trick us into consent. And we have to stand in the power of our own sovereignty and say, no, I'm not going to be fooled or misguided by, word magic. I'm going to stand in the power of truth as a sovereign being,
Totally. Well, we will be talking about rights in a minute. I am conscious of time. We have about 30 minutes or so. So what we want to do is quick shoot these questions over, and then we can jump on the right side of things.
Sure.
Okay, Mark, Jerry's wondering, can you ask Mark, are these Satanists very networked internationally these days, and can he confirm, do you know if they are also heavily involved in stalking harassment programs, aka gang stalking?
I don't know a lot about that topic per se, but I can definitely tell you that they use electronic methods of torture, for sure, and it wouldn't be beyond my imagining that they would turn that loose on some people that might oppose their agenda. Like I said, nothing like that ever happened to me. Their approach with me was, I'm going to completely ignore your existence, so as not to lend any credibility to anything that you say. I highly doubt they would ever try to, do anything, because that would just validate everything that I've said. When somebody puts out a message in a far-reaching way, if they something suddenly happens to them, people start, picking up their head and saying, hey, maybe, that happened to him because exactly what he was saying is the way that it is. So their approach is going to be, leave this person alone, let them say what they're going to say, and hopefully we could dissuade people from ever looking into it by ignoring it or saying there's nothing to see there, But as far as electronic methods of torture goes, I know that that's real. I know that that's definitely being used against some people. The capacities in which they bring that out, I would probably imagine right now they're in testing phases with a lot of that technology, and I don't know the extent or exactly how that's being used. It's an area of research that I need to do more work in personally, but I do not deny that exists and is going on.
Yeah, we're very familiar with the TI thing. We've had a lot, guests on and people talking about it, and it's used quite extensively on a lot of people. So you're on the money there, Steve.
Mark Kim was wondering how important is the Trivium as a working solution, and can you expand on the Trivium?
100% absolutely critical. It is the truth discovery methodology that needs to be employed to understand natural law. I actually have a model, a simple 4-step model that you could just, follow this through, okay, of how our reality is created, okay? So, if you just look at the foundation of this little model, I'm gonna build 4 blocks, okay? Look at this as just, like child's alphabet blocks, like a simple cubic block, right? The bottom one, the foundation, is knowledge, okay? This is the potential for understanding in our lives, okay? This is the potential for grasping of truth, okay? And it's comprised of a multiplicity of information that is available in the world that we could gather, we can process, we can understand, and then we can act upon. So that's your grammar, okay? It's, in the ancient Trivium method, it was known as simply the knowledge stage. You're going to gather all your information and take it in, okay? And, you look at this is like the feminine component. It's like the right brain, because we take in that knowledge. It involves being open-minded at that stage. Then we're going to squeeze that knowledge through a filter. This is the understanding step of the Trivium. So we put another block on top of that bottom block. That on top of the knowledge block, we put the understanding block. These are the decision-making processes that take place within the human psyche, within the mind. And these processes are chosen by each individual based on the availability of information that they've taken in. So our capacity to understand is directly related to that first block that it's built on top of. How much knowledge did we take in? Then there's a third block on top of that, a third stage or step. That's the wisdom step. And here's where once we've developed understanding, then we need to do something with that understanding. We've taken in the knowledge, we've filtered it, we've weeded out all the logical inconsistencies, and now we have a deep understanding of what we've taken in. Now, what do we do with it? We act upon it. That's the rhetoric stage, okay? So, human behavior, this is the output stage, is based upon the quality of the decision-making processes which happened in step number 2, which in turn was based upon the quality of available information of step 1. Now what happens on top of that process? We act, behavior, exists in the world. We've acted now. And when that happens in the aggregate sense, when all people of a whole society are basically essentially behaving in certain ways, then we have a generated result. And the actual manifested reality will either be orderly, based upon whether we've attained wisdom through this 3-step process, or it will be disorderly and chaotic if we have ignored truth, did not develop understanding, and are not acting wisely. This is the law of nature. This is the law of freedom, as I call it. If we take in good knowledge of truth, of natural law, we understand it, and then we act upon it in harmony with it, which means that we are moral beings. We are behaving morally. Then there will be freedom. We will have freedom as a result. That will be the generated reality. Conversely, if we do not take in the knowledge of natural law, we ignore it, and we don't understand the difference between right and wrong, and our behavior is immoral, then we will receive a chaotic, disorderly result that is called slavery. That's what I call the law of freedom. That's how freedom works. Freedom is directly proportional to morality. As morality increases, freedom in a society increases. As morality in a society declines, freedom declines in that society. It works flawlessly 100% of the time. And the Trivium is the methodology the specific truth discovery methodology for the understanding and application of natural law. It is critical, absolutely critical. And that's also why it is buried and occulted. They don't want people understanding the Trivium methodology.
It's funny they should say about the knowledge. I normally say knowledge is the book and wisdom is the experience. And that's kind of the way I see it. And again, they have the knowledge, and because they have the knowledge, and when you have knowledge gives you choice. Ignorance doesn't.
That's right.
Which is one of the things that we always say. But yeah, we need to change. And I think changing the morality of human nature, I think as you become a sovereign person, let's call it as being a sovereign person and taking responsibility for yourself, your morality should change. I mean, it should change to, taking responsibility for your actions and do unto others and all that. Well, I'm not really talking about the Ten Commandments here, but just taking responsibility for your actions and to be to treat everybody with respect, I suppose, at the end of the day. That's kind of a moral thing. Now, there's people out there who don't give a monkeys about anybody except themselves. And that's, right, for me, that's low morality. And as you say...
That's Satanism.
Yeah.
That's exactly what that is.
Exactly. And our society now, the way things are going, the way the system is, one of the things they want to do is bring in chaos, which will be a lower level of morality with people.
You got it. I mean, that's the definition of what chaos is. We receive chaos and disorder in our whole experience here on Earth when our behavior is immoral. That's the definition of how chaos gets created in society. Yeah. When we don't know the difference between right and wrong. Which I guess this is a good place to get into that. What is the difference between right and wrong? This is the heart of natural law. The very heart of the understanding of natural law is a deep understanding of the objective difference between right and wrong. Right and wrong are not subjective. They are not judgments that we apply as a result of our preferences or whims. Okay, that's called moral relativism. And that's another tenet of Satanism. The idea that we get to make up what's right and wrong based on our preferences, likes, dislikes, whims, etc. Okay, nothing could be further from the truth. Right and wrong exist in nature, like natural law. Well, natural law exists based upon the foundation of the objective difference between right and wrong. Okay, how's behavior going to be governed? Behavior is going to be governed according whether it is in harmony with right or whether it is out of harmony with right, meaning wrong.
Question for you on that one. Neil Donald Walsh, the guy who wrote the book Conversations with God, one of the things he said in there, which is quite interesting, which is what you're talking about now, he actually said that there's no such thing as right and wrong. There's only your way and my way. Now,
he's completely mistaken. It's a New Age deception.
Well,
I'm not saying he's propagating that willfully. He may have bought into that moral relativism, and what he doesn't understand is that is satanic ideology. Okay. That is what Satanism actually teaches and is.
Well, can I just jump in there? The fact he says this, based on the whole morality thing, if he's saying that, there's only your way and my way, well, surely we will, my morals might be different to somebody else who doesn't give a damn about anybody else and is just out for themselves. So right. in their perception of the way they see things, what they do is right, but morally we know it's wrong because their morals are lower than mine.
There's a reason we can know whether something is moral or immoral. Again, everybody's rights are the same. There is no such thing as this is right for me and it's wrong for you, or this is wrong for me and it's right for you. Okay? What we're talking about there is a preference regarding something that doesn't have anything to do with the commission of a moral or immoral behavior. Okay? So in other words, is it right for me to eat vanilla ice cream, or is it right for me to, I don't know, read a particular book? I might like comedy. You might like nonfiction, okay? What's right? That's not what we're talking about when it comes to the term right and wrong. These are preferences or likes, okay? A different flavoring on food. I might like sweet, you might like salty. These are subjective interpretations. When we're talking about right and wrong insofar as moral and immoral behavior are concerned, they are objective standards that are the same for every single being in creation, everywhere in the universe. And they never change. They are unchanging.
But where's the breakdown? Where's the breakdown with somebody who goes and mugs a granny and he finds that morally okay? He just,
right.
He'll just go and do it. Now we know that's morally
it's
wrong.
Obviously morally wrong because harm was resulted.
Yeah.
Harm resulted to another being.
Yeah.
So if harm results to another being, that's an immoral behavior. Harm has to result in the interaction. Okay?
Yeah.
So what we're doing here is, if you think about this, we're defining right in the negative. We're defining wrong in the affirmative. So what is right? Right is that which is based in truth because it is in harmony with natural law. It is in harmony with the laws of morality. That's what a right is. It is an action that does not result in harm to another being. Very simply, a right is an action that does not result in harm to another being.
Okay.
In as simply of a way that it can be stated. So that is what is known as an apophatic definition. We haven't started listing rights. I have a right to make a call on this cell phone. I have a right to start playing some music on my stereo, etc. Okay? These are rights, but we're not defining right in the affirmative sense. We're saying what a right is not. And this is called the apophatic inquiry method, or the apophatic definition. Let me spell that. A-P-O-P-H-A-T-I-C, apophatic. This comes from the term apophasis, and I'll spell that. People really should look up this term and acquaint themselves with the concept of apophasis, okay? A-P-O-P-H-A-S-I-S. Apophasis is a reasoning method. It's a method of discovery, again, similar to the Trivium, all right? And it is employed when you're given a set of possibilities in order to arrive at knowledge by way of eliminating the things that you know to be incorrect or the negatives, okay? So what you're doing through apophasis is you're describing what something is by explaining what it is not, okay? It has been called affirmation through negation. Sherlock Holmes, the Sherlock Holmes books written by Arthur Conan Doyle, he said, whatever, if you eliminate the impossible, that which remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. It is a deductive reasoning method. So it comes from the noun apophasis in Greek, which means to say no, to say what something is not, to say not. This is not this. So a right is something that does not cause harm to others. An action, when we take it, it does not result in harm to others. Conversely, a wrong, we're going to define in the affirmative sense. When we take an action that is wrong, that is immoral, that is not based in truth, that is in opposition to natural law, harm results to someone else, to another being, whether a person or an animal. Okay? If we take an action and it results in harm to another being, okay, and the harm is measurable. It's not a subjective thing. It's not like you saying, oh, you hurt my feelings, because you told me something that was uncomfortable to me. I have to harm you physically or defraud you of something that you have a right to, okay? Yeah. So if I take your right to speak from you by coercion or duress or violence, that's not a right. That's a wrong. You were harmed because I withheld a right from you to enact. Okay? The wrongdoings, the list of harmful actions are very short. We can go all day and night and all week and all month listing what rights are, what rights we have. We have infinite amount of rights. Okay? There are 6 very specific things that we don't have a right to do. There's 6 basic wrongdoings that I challenge people to come up with something that's, a wrongdoing that's not included in this list. We could even tack on a 7th. Here's the wrongdoings: murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, and coercion. Murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, and coercion. I would probably also include willfully lying to another human being to deceive them or withhold information deliberately that they need to make informed decisions. Okay? So, we could put lying in there too.
So can we just jump in there with the rights? Because
Sure.
the issue that we have here, I'm just watching the time as well, but the issue we have here, obviously what's going on globally, but over here in Ireland, because this is where we are at the moment, is that we have a government who is forcing, through coercion, if not...
Coercion.
Coercion. If not immorally, corruption, for want of a better word, but they are trying to force us by using threats on paper to pay a thing called property tax, a property charge. Now, people are kind of standing up to the system and saying, we're not having that. So obviously it goes back to the original question that this is, as far as from what you said, it's this is null and void because they're doing this and they know they're morally wrong. But
all of man's law is based in moral relativism. All of man's law is ultimately based in a satanic principle. Because if something is in harmony with moral law, it doesn't need to be written down and, quote, enforced. It's already enforced in nature. It's already in effect and can never be taken out of effect. So writing down, that's like writing down, during a cloudless sunny day, the sky refracts blue light to the human eye. Well, you can write that down all you want, or you could write down that it refracts orange light all day, and, regardless of what anybody thinks or believes, the sky refracts blue light during a sunny, cloudless day here on Earth to the human eye. Okay? Now, maybe except when they're spraying chemtrails in the sky, but, my point is taken. It doesn't refract orange light. Okay? That's just the truth. And no matter how much you write that statement down that it refracts orange light, it's never going to make it true. Same thing with man's law. You could write down something that is in opposition to moral law all you want. If it's in opposition to natural law, writing it down doesn't make it true. Yeah. Writing it down can't ever change that. It's natural law is permanently set in stone and can never be changed. It is the boundary conditions that the creator of the universe put into effect, just like gravity, electromagnetism, inertia, momentum, any of the other physical laws of nature. Natural law works 100% of the time flawlessly and absolutely. It's like a computer program that's running. All you can do is input data into it. The program is already written, and you're going to get output based upon your input. That's it.
Okay, so let's go back to the rights. What I said at the start of the show, there's no book out there at the moment that says, this is the book of the rights that you have. Because people say you have the right to this, you have the right to that, you have the right to this. But there's I haven't seen any book, nobody's put this down in documentation so we can say, through the educational system, they don't say, right, okay kids, we're going to teach you all about what your rights are. They don't do that because ignorance is bliss and they make money. So how do I know what my rights are if I can't look them up? Where do I go to find these?
You know what your rights are by knowing what your rights are not. You know what your rights are by knowing what wrongs are. You can never know what all of your rights are because, as I said, rights are limitless. They're infinite. We can't ever have a book that lists all the rights of man because you would be writing forever. What you can know is the very short list of specific behaviors that are not rights. Everything else is a right. This is why rights can only be defined in the apophatic sense. They cannot be described in the affirmative sense. You can only say a right is an action which does not cause harm to another. Therefore, what do we have to know what any of our rights are? We have to know what actions do cause harm to another. So the actions that do cause harm to another, the transgressions against moral law, natural law, are the harmful actions that we are capable of taking as human beings. Murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, coercion, and lying.
Well, coercion on bordering on extortion. I was just going to say the coercion bordering on extortion to a certain extent because that's what the governments are doing. And obviously,
the threat of violence. It's holding someone under duress, which is the threat of violence.
Exactly. And of course,
That's
turn
where
around.
we're at now. We are living under duress. The direct threat of violence through coercion. Somebody saying, you will align your behavior to my will.
Yeah.
Or I will take physical consequentive actions against you.
Yeah.
Which is called coercion, which is violence.
Yeah.
All of these actions are violence. The word violence comes from to violate. What are you violating when you take violent behavior? You're violating someone else's natural rights. Things that they can do because they don't cause harm to others, you're preventing them from doing that or enjoying the fruits of that behavior.
Yeah. Okay, well listen, Mark, we've 2 more questions, which if you can do a quick fire on, that'd be brilliant.
Sure.
So
if I could just establish one quick thing about these transgressions against natural law, these wrongdoings, these harmful actions.
Yeah.
They are all forms of theft. Murder is the theft of someone's life. Assault is the theft of their well-being in their body. Rape is the theft of their free will to sexually associate with whom they choose. Theft is the literal theft of their property. Trespass is the theft of their safety within their living space or their lair. Okay? Coercion is the theft of free will, choice. Lying is the theft of truth from someone else. Okay?
Yeah.
Of their ability to know what's going on. Okay? So, every single natural law wrongdoing, the transgressions against natural law, are a form of theft. That's why natural law, the understanding of natural law ultimately boils down to one simple phrase: don't steal. Theft is the ultimate form of wrongdoing. Every form of wrongdoing is a form of theft in some form or fashion. We need to learn what our property is. All rights are property rights. Life is a form of property. Rights are a form of property. Okay? Don't take that which does not belong to you. Do not steal. That is the epitome, the concrescence of all natural law. It is what we are here to learn. We are here to learn what we own and what we do not own. What our rightful property is and what property is not. And then we are here to learn, do not take that which does not belong to us, whether it comes in the form of property, life, freedom, rights, etc. These are not things that are ours to take from another being. All natural law boils down to is do not steal. That is the one commandment.
Well, the commandment, do unto others as you would like done unto yourself,
there it
really
is.
Sums it up. I mean, that's really it.
The golden rule.
Steve.
That's it. That's natural law.
Yeah.
Natural law is the golden rule. I like to state it in the apophatic sense. Do not do unto others that which you do not want done unto yourself. Now, how much more powerful is that than the affirmative version of the golden rule?
Yeah.
Which is do unto others as you want done unto yourself.
Yeah.
See, that's somewhat ambiguous, but it's very non-ambiguous when we say do not treat other people in a way that you would not want to be treated yourself. Now the ambiguity goes away.
Yeah.
And the golden rule can be very clearly understood in the apophatic sense.
And that's what we need to do. We need to, well, obviously people are aware of it, whether they apply or not is another thing. But let's have a look at these 2 questions, Dave, and then we'll just do a quick fire on them.
Okay, Mark, this is from Andy. Andy says, "Hi guys, I just love Mark. Could you find the time to ask him about the natural emotion of anger and how it can be used for the good and not just to stay apathetic and soma based calm
Absolutely.
all the time?"
Very, very, very important. Great question. There's this big New Age deception in the New Age community, okay, which is I call it the religion of standing down, the religion of inaction, the religion that buries the sacred masculine spirit of right action in the world. Okay, the new cage movement. I'm taking to calling it. Okay, the one of the biggest deceptions in this movement is that anger should somehow be purged. Okay, that you should never get angry. That this is an emotion that somehow shouldn't exist somehow. Okay, let me tell you something. The Creator of the universe wouldn't have gifted us with a beautiful full spectrum of emotions if they weren't all there for a purpose. Okay, so there is a purpose for anger. While the New Age movement wants to tell people that anger is always negative, it's always a negative emotion, we should seek to purge it, which really means stay calm and carry on. That's what they're really saying. Enjoy your cage. Enjoy your slavery. Enjoy the plantation. Don't get upset about slavery taking place in your midst. Don't get upset about all the rampant evil that's taking place in our midst. No. Okay? Just accept it. Meditate. Learn to take it. Okay? Without resistance. I mean, this is utter nonsense. Utter nonsense being taught by the New Age community. My balance to this is there is a righteous form of anger. It's called righteous indignation. See, non-righteous anger is counterproductive, right? Unchanneled anger is counterproductive. The anger of just a bully going around because he feels bad about himself, going around beating on people, of course that's wrong anger. Of course that's counterproductive. Of course we shouldn't aspire to any kind of anger like that. Okay, that's common sense. But if we want to really move our motivation forward, the first thing that we have to do is when we look at all the wrongs that are going on in the world is we have to feel something in the body. That's what anger is there for. It's saying, this is wrong. This shouldn't stand unchallenged. This must be changed. It should be changed. It needs to be changed. See, this is where the New Age movement is such a deception. They want to tell people, oh, you're not here to actually really change things. You're here to be tolerant of everything, accept everything. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's a huge deception.
Yeah. And I think
righteous indignation, when we channel it positively, when we channel it productively, and we use it as a motivation to create true positive change in the world, is a very powerful and positive emotion. I think it has to be righteous indignation, though. Yes.
I think the other thing as well, Mark, is that, again, in the New Age movement, you have this belief system where, you have to stay positive and keep away and don't look at anything negative.
Yeah, don't look at the negative.
Don't look at the negative. Well, these people across over in the Ukraine, in Libya and Afghanistan are being killed and tortured and drowned and everything else. Oh, that's negative. Don't look at that. Yeah, no, you can't talk about that. That means you're giving them the permission to do what they're doing.
That's right. By not saying no, you're tacitly saying yes. And let me tell you something, folks. Ignorance is never empowering.
No.
Ignoring something that is going on is never a path to empowerment. That's the path to more chaos and more bondage.
Yeah.
That's the path to.
Definitely. And, we have to stop this thing with I'm a spiritual person, as Steve is spiritual in his own way as well, but I'm well aware that a wrong is a wrong regardless. And something has to be done.
And can never be made into a right. Exactly. And a right is a right regardless and can never be turned into a wrong.
Exactly.
This is what man's law in its moral relativism and its satanic ideology attempts to do. People think that by the consent of a whole bunch of people, of masses somehow, that a right can be turned into a wrong, or that a wrong can be turned into a right, or that we could somehow get together and grant somebody the right, quote unquote, to commit a wrongdoing that someone else doesn't have a right to do. We believe that there are certain people who have magical privileges, that somehow have magical rights that nobody else has because they're wearing a badge or a uniform, or they're calling themselves a government agent. I mean, it's just such utter nonsense. It's so ridiculous that this even has to be explained to other human beings that it hurts my heart for the human mind, for the human condition, that it could be this degraded and buried in ignorance, that we actually believe that some people have rights that other people don't have. Or some people have, can do things that cause harm that, are prohibited from other people. Or that they can stop people from exercising a behavior that is a right to do. I mean, it's just absolutely, utterly ludicrous that it's the 21st century and we consider ourselves evolved human beings and we don't know still the difference between right and wrong behavior, and we think right and wrong can be legislated.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And that it's not absolute, and it's somehow based upon human perception and our whims to write down and say, this is a right, and this person can do this even if it causes harm. Oh, and this is a wrong, and even if it doesn't cause harm, we're going to punish you if you do it, like prohibition or, things like that.
Yeah, definitely.
It's utterly ludicrous.
Okay, we've one more question before we wrap things up.
The last question of the evening is from Chris. Chris wants to know, can you ask Mark where we, the human race, came from?
Yeah, that's a long, long story that's definitely another show or perhaps multiple shows. I do not ascribe to the creationist theory. I do not ascribe to the evolutionary theory in the sense of Charles Darwin or social Darwinism as an extension. I am a proponent of the interventionist theory that a non-human intelligence had to do with the creation of human beings, that was misguided, that did it for reasons that were selfish, and left a condition present, and I do mean left a condition that they created that was present completely out of balance, and we are still working out that abandonment, those abandonment issues to the very current day. And until we understand our true origins, we're not going to make much progress in changing the current human condition. It's something that I am exploring in depth on my own radio show right now. I built up to it over the course of about 3 years, 4 years practically, and I am now slowly unfurling that material on my own show. If you want to skip ahead and get a little crash course in it, and I mean a really quick crash course in it, you could check out my presentation on my website in the video section at whatonearthishappening.com, my website, the video called Cosmic Abandonment. I really highly recommend people check out my material on natural law first and foremost. But if you want to check out my take on human origins, then check out the video Cosmic Abandonment. But it is definitely for the quote-unquote advanced class. If you don't have my prior material as prerequisite knowledge, this isn't going to be something you want to hit beginners with for certain. People who have really done a lot of research into human antiquity and human origins already would probably find this particular material a little bit more palatable. It's not for the beginner. Okay, right. Just to sum up, what's the positives? Where are we going at the moment? We have a couple of minutes there. Tell us, where are we on the planet? How are we getting on? Are we going in the right direction? Are people beginning to wake up? Is there energy coming into the planet that's making changes to people, or do you begin to realize what's going on? Great questions. Okay. We're going in the wrong direction. A tiny, infinitesimally small group of human beings on this planet that are scattered to the four winds of the earth do know what's going on, do know the difference between right and wrong, are truly awakening. There's a huge false awakening movement that I would refer to simply as the New Cage movement that is teaching people feel-good, false, pseudo-spirituality that does not have to do with the true understanding of the objective difference between right and wrong behavior and the free will decision to choose right action over wrong action, and stressing the importance of that. It also is largely acting as another religion in the sense that it is telling people that some other force is going to save us. It's just this force coming into the world right now that is going to, suddenly magically transform consciousness. Well, it doesn't work that way, folks. We have to do that work for ourselves, and how we do that great work to transform consciousness is by continuously speaking the truth of natural law to everyone within earshot, whether they are ready to hear it, whether they are resistant to it or not. That is the great work. Why do you think they call it work? Why isn't it the great vacation? Why isn't it the great preference or the great, decision about maybe I'll do this or maybe I won't? No, it's not called that. It's called the great work. It involves effort. What is the scientific definition of work? Having to apply force to accomplish something, to get something done. Okay? To use force to move an object from here to there. Okay? Use energy. You move the human consciousness from where we're at, which is slavery, to a place of order and freedom in society. Force is going to need to be applied. That is applied through the human voice. The universe is spoken into existence. And we co-create with the natural law. Okay? By understanding the laws of morality and then teaching them to as many other people as possible. That's the great work. That's the work nobody wants to do. Or not nobody, but a tiny, paltry few people have accepted that cross, have accepted that banner and have said, yes, I will carry this weight. I will do this. I will step into the full moral responsibility as a knowledgeable individual about the difference between right and wrong, and I will speak this to all others absolutely unapologetically, whether they are ready to hear it or not. But this is what has not been done. This is why we are in the situation we are in, for the very reason that the great work is shunned.
Yeah, definitely.
For the very reason that we will not confront our fellow brothers and sisters, our family members, the people we work with, the people we're around on a daily basis. Non-confrontation leads to more chaos, ladies and gentlemen. If you will not confront your fellow human being about the objective difference between right and wrong and how they are living in their life that is in opposition to the laws of morality, you yourself are contributing to the dynamic of disorder, chaos, and slavery. And I don't care who gets offended by that statement. Get as offended as you want by it. The great work is to get up in other people's faces about the difference between right and wrong and call them on their absolute bull regarding their behavior that is in direct opposition to the laws of morality. Because the human species has been loath to learn the difference between right and wrong for themselves, and then even more so has been loath to teach the difference between right and wrong to other people. That is the very causal reason that we have the level of chaos and enslavement that we do as a species. And until that dynamic changes, do not expect anything to change in the external manifested reality. Expect more slavery. Expect more chaos. Expect more disorder until we step into our personal moral responsibility and do that great work that I have just described.
And
if we do that, then the world will change for the better. Then we will start co-creating wisely in harmony with the laws of creation, and we will create true freedom, and the world will be so radically transformed that we will be scarcely even be able to envision what human beings will become capable of once we step into that personal empowerment.
Brilliant. Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that's brilliant. I totally agree with you there, Mark. And Steve, we have to keep waking people up, and don't be afraid of confrontation. Go off and do it, and then give them the facts, give them the information. Listen, before we let you go, because we've 9 minutes left on the show, we have to pass over to another radio station. Give us a quick rundown on your websites there so people can know where to find you.
Yes, absolutely. My main website is whatonearthishappening.com. Whatonearthishappening.com. There's a huge body of information and knowledge up there. You want to take it slow, and I recommend to people a lot of people become familiar with me through YouTube, and I don't have a problem with that. It helps reach more people, but they get a very incomplete understanding of my work if they just watch one or two YouTube videos. It's not how I recommend my work be taken in. I highly recommend to people to go to my website, whatonearthishappening.com, go to the podcast section. There's a podcast tab. There's also a button on the left-hand side of the page that says begin the journey and free your mind with the What on Earth is Happening podcast. If you go to the podcast section, you go back to number 1, okay? They're in reverse chronological order, okay? Because the most recent ones are at the top. For people who come to the page, they want the most recent ones. You want to go all the way back to the last page of the podcast section and go back to number 1. Start listening in order from number 1. It is a very specifically and meticulously constructed tapestry of information and knowledge, okay, that is done methodically for a reason. There is prerequisite information laid down in the early podcasts that to understand the later podcasts, you need the frame of reference in the earlier work, in the earlier podcasts. So my recommendation is you go to the podcast section, you go back to number 1, and you listen forward to all of the podcasts in order, without skipping around. Don't say, oh, I want to know what he was talking about, recently. Be patient. Listen in order at your own pace, at your own leisure. When you have time to do it, when you have time to take it in. Okay? If you do that, you're going to get the maximum value from my information on my website. Again, whatonearthishappening.com. I also have another website, and the videos there too. Take them in. I highly recommend the Natural Law Seminar videos. 3 videos. It's about 8 hours of information. The Natural Law Seminar is probably the one place, if you have no time for any of the other work, you don't want to miss the Natural Law Seminar. It is the most powerfully condensed version of the most important aspects of my work in 3 videos.
Okay.
I have a secondary website called freeyourmindconference.com. It's 2 conferences that I helped to co-host and organize in 2011 and 2013. So you could check that out as well. Tons of brilliant speakers, tons of videos up there. freeyourmindconference.com. That's my other website.
Brilliant stuff. Mark, that's fantastic information. Just stay with us there. We have to just round up the show there, but if you can hang on until 9 o'clock there, or we'll have a chat with you after the show. Just bear with us there for a minute. Right, okay, we're not going to go to a musical break because we're going to basically wind up things. We've just a couple of announcements. Fantastic information there from Mark. We'll have a chat with Mark. I'm sure we're going to fit in a part 2 somewhere because there's so much more stuff that we can talk about, so much stuff that we didn't cover. Apologies to the listeners who sent in questions that we didn't get them covered, but, you know, I mean, these subject matters that we're talking about, I mean, one show, we could cover one subject with one show, and there's so many subjects going on there. So, again, thanks very much for everybody tuning in to the chat facility. Now, next week, we have a chap called David Hugo Boyle on the show. Now, David, I think his website is all that is in the universe or something, isn't it, Steve? Something like that. All that is, I think. And David has been on, for people who used to watch controversial TV, David used to be on there. He had a couple of shows on there. You might be familiar with him, but if you go to Google and type in David Hugo Boyle, you'll actually come across David. And David is very open-minded to a lot of things, going back to even what Mark just talked about the whole alien Anunnaki thing and the being seeded by the aliens for whatever reason. Now, as I say, David has a very open mind to a lot of things that's out there. Some of you mightn't agree with it, some of you might agree with it, but that's the whole thing. That's the whole idea of getting the information and getting it out there. And so I think it's going to be a very interesting show next week as well. Now, just a reminder that we are going to try and get on Dr. Rima on the show and her website address with all the bits and pieces on it, which is going to be interesting. Anything happening during the week for you, Steve?
I'm going to be doing my research because when you talked about Dr. Rima there, Jim actually sent in some information at the beginning of the show. He just said, do some research on Rima Lavey and her husband, Major General Albert N. Stubbeline III. You may be surprised by what comes to light. So yeah, I'm going to check that out. I've copied some links there from the chat as well, and I'm going to email them to myself and check them. I'm going to check out Mark's websites as well. So that's whatonearthishappening.com, freeyourmindconference.com for all the information. Yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing during the week, and maybe a spot of gardening
and a bit of gardening. Well, it's good to know that myself and Steve were on the right track really regarding the fluid belief system, because we have been, for regular listeners to the show, we have been promoting this. And, you know, everybody has an opinion, I suppose, and opinions are like, well, we've said that on the show before, we won't go into detail. But all we say to people is, look, if you're going to give your opinion, let people know that it is only your opinion. And don't base your opinion as fact. And if it is going to be a fact, give them the information. Show them, say, this is my opinion, and, you know, here's the information to back it up. Because, you know, an opinion is only an opinion, unless you back it up with some evidence or some research. I think we're all too quick to give an opinion and not back it up with something. All I'll say is, don't lack confidence in your knowledge. Go and study, go and learn. Knowledge gives you choice, ignorance doesn't. You know, knowledge is the book, wisdom is the experience. Go out there and wake people up, and don't be afraid of the confrontation with people. You know, we all have a moral conscience to make this world a better place, and we can only do it if we all go out and do it, and we all promote, and we all support each other. And that's what we need to do. And I think, you know, We try and do that on a regular
I think
basis.
if you had a theme song at this moment in time, it'd be that one. We are the world. We are the world. I can just hear that playing in the background when you were talking.
Do you have it daydreaming. Do you have it there on the computer?
No, I don't.
No, I don't.
No,
okay.
I have no Clannad either.
Yeah, no Clannad either. Okay. So, we're going to let you go. We're going to have a quick talk with Mark after. I'm sure we'll be able to do a part 2. We're going over to People's Internet Radio, and I'm not too sure who's on. Any information on who's on?
I'm sure Vin will be there.
I'm sure Vin will be on. So
he'll be in the hot seat, and you'll all be in good hands. So stay tuned.
Excellent stuff. And don't forget, United We Strike Radio Marathon podcasts are up there. Dr. Rima is on the podcast. I recommend going over to the podcast and listening to Dr. Rima, the show that she's on. Brilliant information, brilliant website, loads of products. Definitely worth to listen, definitely worth to have a look at our site there. Until next week, take care, stay safe. If you have any news or any links, let us know. And if there's any news, obviously we'll send it out during to the registered users there. Take care. This is Alan James saying good night. Bye-bye.
Okay, I can't compete with that, so I'm just going to say we'll do it all again next week. Thanks to everyone for the crack we had in the chat. Most enjoyable, and we'll do it all again next week for myself, Stephen George. Take care, good night, bye-bye.
Open your mind.